Before we get into this incredible story, if you love Family Feud moments that will leave you speechless, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. There was a time when marriage meant something sacred, when a husband's word was his bond and a wife could trust the man standing beside her without question. But what happened on Family Feud in the fall of 2024 would shatter that belief for one woman and restore it for everyone watching. When Steve Harvey heard what came out of Marcus Thompson's mouth during a routine question, he stopped the entire show. And when Marcus's wife, Denise, realized what her husband had just revealed on live television, she did something that left 200 audience members sitting in complete, stunned silence. What she said next proved that the truth always finds a way out, even on a game show stage. Purpose: build deep emotional connection through detailed backstory. Marcus and Denise Thompson had been married for 22 years. They lived in a modest but well-kept home in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of house with a big porch and a garden out back that Denise tended to every single morning before the sun came up. To their neighbors, to their church community, to everyone who knew them, they were the perfect couple. The kind of couple that younger folks looked up to and older folks nodded at with approval. Denise was 51 years old. She had spent 20 years working as a school nurse at Jefferson Elementary, the same school their 3 children had attended. She was the kind of woman who remembered every kid's name, who kept extra snacks in her office for the ones who came to school hungry, and who stayed late every Friday to make sure the kids who needed it had clean clothes for the weekend. Her colleagues called her Nurse D, and the children adored her. She had given her life to that school and to her family, often putting everyone else's needs before her own. Marcus was 53. He worked as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, a job that required him to travel 3 or 4 days a week. He was charming, well-spoken, and the kind of man who could walk into any room and make everyone feel like his best friend. He had a big laugh and a bigger smile, and he always seemed to have the right thing to say at the right time. At least, that is what everyone thought. The Thompsons had come on Family Feud as part of a family reunion trip. Denise's mother, 78-year-old Ruth Williams, had always dreamed of seeing the show in person. When the family got selected as contestants, Ruth said it was the happiest day of her life since the birth of her grandchildren. She sat in the front row of the audience that day, wearing her Sunday best, a lavender dress with matching hat, beaming with pride as her daughter and son-in-law took the stage. Their 3 children, Marcus Jr., Tamika, and little David, had all grown up watching their parents hold hands in church, cook Sunday dinner together, and slow dance in the kitchen when they thought nobody was looking. Marcus Jr. was 20 now and away at college on a football scholarship. Tamika was 18 and about to graduate high school with honors. David was 14, the baby of the family, and he worshipped his father. He wanted to be a salesman just like his dad when he grew up. Those kids believed their parents had the strongest marriage in the world, and Denise had worked very hard to make sure they kept believing that. What nobody in that audience knew, what even Denise herself did not fully understand yet, was that Marcus Thompson had been hiding something for almost 3 years. The late nights he blamed on work. The business trips that seemed to happen more and more often. The way he would step outside to take phone calls and come back smiling a little too wide. Denise had noticed all of it. She had filed each detail away in the back of her mind, the way a woman does when she is not ready to face what those details add up to. But the bright lights and pressure of live television were about to drag that secret right out into the open. Purpose: build emotional investment through escalating challenges and the exposure moment. The game begins. The Thompson family was matched up against the Rivera family from Houston, Texas. The first few rounds went smoothly. Denise was sharp and quick with her answers. Marcus played the crowd, cracking jokes and high-fiving his teammates after every point. Steve Harvey was enjoying the energy. He kept joking with Marcus about his salesman personality, saying things like, "Man, you could sell ice to a penguin." Marcus ate it up. He loved the attention. He thrived on it. By the 3rd round, the Thompsons were leading. The mood was light. The audience was laughing, Everything seemed perfect. And then Steve asked the question that changed everything. The question, it was a face-off question. Marcus stepped up to the podium across from David Rivera. Steve looked at his card and read the question aloud. Name something a husband might hide from his wife. The audience chuckled. It was a classic Family Feud question, the kind that usually gets funny, harmless answers like, his spending, or, how much he ate. David Rivera buzzed in first and said, a credit card. Solid answer. The board showed it was up there. But Marcus had buzzed in a half-second later, and when Steve turned to him, Marcus was grinning that big salesman grin of his. All right, Marcus, Steve said. Name something a husband might hide from his wife. And Marcus, without thinking, without pausing, without any filter at all, said, a second phone. Now, on the surface that is a perfectly normal answer. It was even on the board. Number 3 answer. The audience laughed. Steve made a face. But something happened in that moment that the cameras caught and the audience felt. Denise's face changed. It was subtle at first. A slight tightening around her eyes. A small drop in her smile. She tilted her head just barely to the side, the way a person does when they hear something that does not sit right. Because Denise had found a second phone in Marcus's coat pocket 3 months ago. She had confronted him about it, and he had told her it was an old work phone he had forgotten to turn in. She had believed him. She had chosen to believe him because 22 years of marriage had earned him that trust. But the way Marcus said it just now, the speed of his answer, the confidence in his voice, the way he did not even blink, it hit her differently. It hit her like a punch to the chest. The cracks widened, the game continued, but Denise was distracted now. She missed her next answer. Her family members exchanged worried looks. Marcus did not notice. He was too busy performing for the audience, too busy being the star of his own show. A few rounds later, another face-off question came up. This time it was Denise versus Maria Rivera. Steve read the question. Name something that would make you suspicious of your partner. Denise buzzed in first. And what she said was not a game show answer. It was a confession. Late nights that don't add up, Denise said. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Steve blinked. The audience went quiet. That was not the kind of quick, funny answer people usually gave. It was too specific, too real. Steve looked at Denise for a long moment. You okay? He asked gently. Denise smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. I'm fine, Steve. Let's see if it's up there. It was not on the board. Maria Rivera won the face-off with coming home smelling like perfume. But the damage was done. The energy in the studio had shifted. People could feel it. Something was happening between Marcus and Denise Thompson, and it was happening right there on national television. The breaking point, the Thompsons lost that round, but were still ahead overall going into the final round. During the commercial break, the cameras were not rolling, but several audience members later reported what they saw. Marcus tried to put his arm around Denise. She stepped away. He leaned in and whispered something to her. She shook her head and looked straight ahead. Her mother, Ruth, sitting in the front row, had noticed the change in her daughter. The old woman's hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her expression had shifted from joy to deep concern. When the cameras came back on for the final round, Steve could tell something was wrong. He had been doing this long enough to read people. He tried to lighten the mood. All right, Thompson family, you are 1 round away from fast money. Let's bring that energy up. Marcus clapped his hands and whooped. But Denise just stood there, her jaw set, her eyes sharp. The final round question was simple. Name something a woman wishes her husband would be more honest about. Marcus buzzed in immediately. How he spends money, he said with a laugh. It was the number 2 answer. The Thompsons won the round and qualified for fast money. The family cheered. Marcus pumped his fist. And that is when Denise Thompson did something that nobody in that studio would ever forget. The exposure, instead of celebrating, instead of hugging her husband or jumping up and down with her family, Denise walked to the center of the stage. She stood right next to Steve Harvey, looked directly into the main camera, and spoke in a voice that was steady, clear, and absolutely unshakable. I need to say something, Denise said. Steve looked confused but did not stop her. Something in her voice told him this was important. Go ahead, he said quietly. Denise took a breath. I have given 22 years of my life to this man. I raised his children. I kept his house. I supported every dream he ever had. I sat by his mother's bedside when she was dying because he was too busy with work trips to be there. And 3 months ago, I found a phone in his coat. A phone I had never seen before. He told me it was an old work phone. And I believed him because that is what a wife does after 22 years. She believes. The studio was dead silent. 200 people, and not one of them made a sound. Marcus's face had gone from confused to pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but Denise was not finished. But the way you answered that question just now, Marcus, a second phone, you did not even have to think about it. You said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because it is natural to you, is it not? That phone was not old. It was not for work. And I think every person in this room can see the truth, even if I have been too afraid to see it myself. Marcus stepped forward. Denise, baby, come on, we are on TV. This is not the place. This is exactly the place, Denise said, and her voice did not waver. Because you have been hiding behind closed doors for years. Maybe it is time the truth came out in the open. Steve Harvey stood between them, not as a host, but as a man who understood the weight of what was happening. He had seen arguments on his show before. He had seen awkward moments and embarrassing answers. But this was different. This was a woman reclaiming her dignity in real time. Purposely deliver satisfying justice, emotional release, and Steve's powerful intervention. Steve steps in. Steve gently placed a hand on Denise's arm. He did not try to calm her down. He did not try to smooth things over for the cameras. Instead, he turned to Marcus and said something that would become one of the most shared moments in Family Feud history. Marcus, I have been hosting this show for a long time, and I have learned that this game has a funny way of revealing who people really are. The questions are simple, but the answers come from somewhere real. And right now, your wife is standing here telling you something that took more courage than anything I have ever seen on this stage. The least you can do is look her in the eye and give her the truth she deserves. The audience erupted in applause, not the polite, prompted kind. Real, emotional, full-hearted applause. Women were standing up. Men were nodding. Ruth, Denise's mother, had tears streaming down her face, but she was sitting up straight, proud of her daughter. Marcus looked around the studio. For the first time all day, his salesman confidence was gone. His shoulders dropped. His eyes went to the floor. And then, in a voice so quiet the microphones barely caught it, he said, "You're right. You deserve better than what I've given you. I'm sorry." He did not deny it. He did not explain it away. He did not make excuses. And somehow, that simple, broken admission was more powerful than any argument could have been. Denise closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She did not scream. She did not collapse. She just stood there with a quiet strength that filled the entire studio. The community rallies, and then something beautiful happened. Denise's mother Ruth stood up from her front row seat. She was 78 years old with arthritic knees and a bad hip, but she stood up like she was 30. She walked slowly to the stage, and the producers did not stop her. Nobody stopped her. The whole room watched as this elderly woman in her lavender Sunday dress climbed those steps and walked right up to her daughter. Ruth took Denise's face in both her hands and said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up, "Baby, your daddy was the same way, and I spent 30 years waiting for him to change. Don't you make my mistake, you hear me? You are worth more than someone sorry." The audience lost it. Women were crying openly. Steve Harvey had to turn away from the cameras for a moment to collect himself. When he turned back, his eyes were red. "Miss Ruth," Steve said, his voice rough with emotion, "that might be the most important thing anyone has ever said on my show." Ruth looked at Steve and replied, "I am just telling the truth, baby. Somebody in this family needs to start." The audience applauded so loud the sound technicians had to adjust their levels. It was a moment of raw, unscripted truth that no amount of television magic could have manufactured. Steve's wisdom. Steve made a decision right there. He stepped to center stage and addressed the audience and the cameras directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a pause. Because what is happening right now is bigger than any game. This is about a family dealing with something real, and I believe that television should be a place where real things are allowed to happen. He turned back to Denise. Denise, I want you to know something. I have been married. I have failed at marriage. I have been the man who was wrong. And I can tell you from the other side that what you just did, standing up and saying enough, that is the bravest thing a person can do. It does not matter if it is on this stage or in your living room. The courage is the same. Then Steve said something that would later be shared millions of times on social media. In all my years of hosting, I have learned that this game reveals character. And today, Denise Thompson showed us what real character looks like. It is not about having all the right answers. It is about having the courage to face the truth, purpose, reinforce moral lesson, show lasting impact, and deliver universal application. Immediate resolution: the Thompson family did not play fast money that day. The producers offered, but Denise declined. She said the money did not matter. What mattered was that she had finally spoken her truth. Steve respected her decision completely. Before the family left the stage, Steve pulled Denise aside. The cameras were still rolling, and what he told her became one of the most replayed moments on the Family Feud YouTube channel. Denise, you walked in here today as a contestant, but you are leaving as an example. There are women watching this right now who are sitting in the same silence you have been sitting in. And because of what you did today, some of them are going to find their voice. That is worth more than any prize we could ever give. Denise hugged Steve and whispered, "Thank you for letting me speak." Steve whispered back, "You did not need my permission. You just needed the moment, and you took it." The episode airs. When the episode aired 4 weeks later, the internet exploded. The clip of Denise's speech was shared over 2 million times in the first 48 hours. The hashtag #StandLikeHotDenise began trending on every major platform. Women from all over the country posted their own stories of finding the courage to confront the truth in their relationships. Therapists and counselors shared the clip in their sessions, calling it one of the most powerful examples of self-advocacy they had ever seen on television. Ruth's words to her daughter became their own viral moment. The clip of her walking up to that stage and taking Denise's face in her hands was viewed over 5 million times. People called it the most powerful mother-daughter moment ever captured on a game show. Ruth's quote about being worth more than someone's sorry was printed on T-shirts, coffee mugs, and even tattoos. At 78 years old, Ruth Williams had become an unexpected voice for women everywhere who had stayed too long in relationships that did not honor them. What happened to Denise 3 months after the episode aired? Denise filed for divorce. She told a local news station that the Family Feud moment had not ended her marriage. The marriage had been ending for years. What the show had done was give her the strength to stop pretending. She said that standing on that stage, with 200 strangers watching, she realized that if she could speak the truth in front of all of those people, she could certainly speak it in a courtroom. Denise went back to work at Jefferson Elementary, where she was greeted with a standing ovation from the staff. Her students made her cards that said things like, "Nurse D is the bravest person we know." She kept every single one of them pinned to her office wall. She also started a support group at her church for women going through difficult marriages. The group, which she named Truth Tuesdays, started with 6 women and within a year had grown to over 60. They met every Tuesday evening in the church basement, sharing their stories, supporting each other, and finding the courage to make the changes they needed in their lives. Her mother Ruth became a regular at the meetings, sitting in the corner with a cup of tea, occasionally sharing her own wisdom when the moment called for it. She became a grandmother figure to every woman in that room, and her advice was always simple and direct. She would say things like, "Love is supposed to make you stronger, not smaller. If it is making you smaller, that is not love." Steve Harvey's response: Steve Harvey addressed the episode on his daytime talk show the following week. He spoke for nearly 10 minutes about what had happened, and his words were personal, honest, and deeply moving. He talked about his own failures in marriage, his own moments of dishonesty, and how watching Denise had reminded him of the damage that secrets can do to a family. He said that Marcus's answer about the second phone had been a moment of truth disguised as a game show answer, and that the game had done exactly what it sometimes does. It had revealed what was hidden. Steve also praised Ruth, calling her the real MVP of the episode. He said that her words about not making the same mistake had carried the weight of a lifetime of experience, and that every man watching should have listened carefully. He announced that his foundation would be donating to organizations that support women navigating domestic challenges, and he invited Denise to appear on his talk show whenever she was ready. The lasting impact. 1 year after the episode, Family Feud did a follow-up segment. Denise appeared looking radiant, confident, and at peace. She had finalized her divorce, bought a small house of her own just 3 blocks from her mother, and had been promoted to head nurse at her school district. Her support group had expanded to 3 locations across Charlotte, and she had been invited to speak at a national conference for women's advocacy. When Steve asked her how she was doing, Denise smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her since that day on the show. She said, "Steve, I am doing better than I have in 20 years, and I want every woman watching this to know something. The truth is heavy. I know it is, but the weight of a lie is heavier. I carried someone else's secret for years, and it was crushing me. The moment I put it down, I could finally breathe." Steve nodded slowly and said, "Denise Thompson came on our show to play a game, but she ended up teaching all of us a lesson that no survey could ever measure. She taught us that honesty is not just something you expect from other people. It is something you owe to yourself." The audience gave a standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. As for Marcus, he eventually sought counseling and publicly apologized to Denise through a letter that she shared with her support group. She said she forgave him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. She told the women in her group that forgiveness was not about excusing what someone did. It was about freeing yourself from carrying their mistake. Ruth, at 79 years old, was featured in a local magazine as one of Charlotte's most inspiring women. She told the reporter that the proudest moment of her life was not watching her daughter win on a game show. It was watching her daughter choose herself for the first time in 22 years. The Thompson episode changed Family Feud in a subtle but important way. The producers began to understand that the most powerful moments on the show were not always the funniest or the most outrageous. Sometimes they were the most honest, and Denise Thompson's moment of honesty became the gold standard for what real television could be. Denise's story also had an unexpected impact on how people viewed game shows in general. Media critics wrote about how Family Feud, a show most people thought of as light-hearted entertainment, had become the setting for one of the most genuine moments of courage seen on television in years. Colleges began using the clip in communications and psychology courses as an example of how pressure situations can reveal deeply held truths. Relationship counselors referenced it when talking to couples about the cost of keeping secrets. One therapist wrote an article calling it the most effective marriage counseling session she had ever witnessed, and it happened on a game show stage. 2 years after the episode, Denise was invited to give a TEDx talk in Charlotte. She titled it "The Weight of Silence," and she spoke for 18 minutes about the years she had spent ignoring the signs, the moment on Family Feud that changed everything, and the life she had built on the other side of her fear. The talk was viewed over 3 million times online, and she received thousands of messages from women and men who said her story had given them the courage to confront difficult truths in their own lives. She read every single message and replied to as many as she could, because she remembered what it felt like to be alone with a secret and wishing someone, anyone, would tell you that it was okay to speak up. Steve Harvey often said afterward that in all his years of hosting, he had seen thousands of answers to thousands of questions. But the most important answer he ever witnessed was not on any survey board. It was a woman standing in front of the whole world and saying, "I deserve the truth." And she was right. She absolutely was. If this story moved you, if Denise's courage inspired you, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that their truth matters. We post stories like this every single week, real moments of courage, family, and faith from the Family Feud stage. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss one, and remember what Denise taught us today: the truth is heavy, but the weight of a lie is heavier. See you in the next one.